My name is Daniel. I'm 28, and for most of my life, I thought I understood what loyalty in a relationship meant. I grew up in a home where my parents disagreed often, but one thing my father always said stayed with me: respect is what keeps love alive. The moment one person starts treating the other as if they don't matter, the relationship is already over. I never understood how true that was until I met Claire and we began living together. At first, she seemed like everything I wanted: funny, sharp, and able to brighten any room she entered. But slowly, her humor turned cutting, and more often than not, the jokes came at my expense. After 3 years together, I thought moving in would make us stronger. I remember carrying boxes into our new apartment in the summer heat while she directed, but in truth, that day revealed how she viewed the relationship. She wasn't planning on sharing her life with me. She expected me to adjust, to accommodate, and to stay quiet when her choices overshadowed mine. I told myself I was imagining it, that all couples need time to adjust. But the small things added up quickly. She dismissed my suggestions casually, rolling her eyes at where I wanted to eat, or changing weekend plans without asking. At first, I let it go because I wanted her to be happy. But over time, my own preferences stated. I stopped suggesting things just to avoid the rejection, and she seemed to enjoy that control. Her friends became part of the routine, too. I'd sit with them, trying to join the conversation, when she'd turn me into the punchline. Daniel knows he's not allowed to pick the restaurant. She'd laugh, and they'd laugh with her. I forced a smile each time, but inside, I felt smaller. The breaking point came one Friday. I had asked her earlier in the week if she wanted a quiet night in, takeout, a movie, just us. She agreed, so I bought groceries, cleaned up, and set the space to feel cozy. But when the evening came, she walked in already dressed up. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," she said, grabbing her bag. "I'm going out with the girls. Don't wait up." I must have looked disappointed, because she smirked and added, "Stop acting like my husband, Daniel. You don't own me." Then she repeated it on speakerphone to a friend, turning it into a joke. It hit me harder than I expected. I didn't think I owned her, but the way she said it, like I was nothing more than background noise, made me realize she didn't see me as a partner. I swallowed my pride that night, but something shifted. Respect, the very thing my dad warned me about, was gone. And once it's gone, it doesn't return. The following weeks were worse. She came home late from her so-called girls' nights, brushing off my questions with vague excuses. "You're paranoid," she'd say. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I just wanted honesty. But every answer felt rehearsed, like she was giving me the bare minimum. I stopped confronting her because I knew she wouldn't take me seriously. That's when the thought hit me. What if I stopped being predictable? What if I stopped waiting for scraps of respect and showed her what life looked like without my silence? When she proudly announced she'd be away for a girls' weekend in another city, I nodded politely. But inside, I knew something was about to change. That weekend was the first true quiet I'd had in months. No dismissive comments, no sarcastic jokes, no constant buzzing phone. For the first time, I realized how much space she occupied, not in the apartment, but in my mind. I cooked a simple dinner and ate in peace, but my thoughts kept circling back. ... Why was I the only one compromising? The answer came when I saw her itinerary left on the counter. Dinner reservations for 2, spa treatments for a couple, champagne? This wasn't a girls' trip. My stomach sank. But instead of confronting her right away, I folded the paper back where she left it. In that moment, I understood. She wasn't just dismissive anymore. She was lying, and she believed I wouldn't notice. When she returned, she acted as if nothing had happened. She showed me pictures with her friends, though I noticed the carefully cropped shots. When I didn't react with enthusiasm, she said, "You really need to loosen up, Daniel. Not everything is about you." That sentence cut deeper than she realized, because in truth, nothing was ever about me. My needs, my feelings, my place in the relationship. Her behavior escalated. She invited friends over constantly, turning our home into her stage. Jokes at my expense became the evening's entertainment. One night, in front of her closest friends, she smirked and said, "Oh, Daniel doesn't care. He's basically my roommate who pays the bills." The laughter filled the room as I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. That's when I knew. This wasn't just disrespect. It was contempt. But I didn't explode. Instead, I grew quiet, patient. She became careless, leaving her phone face up, messages lighting up with names I didn't recognize, talking openly on calls as if I wasn't paying attention. At the same time, she began painting herself as the victim. To mutual friends, I was controlling and insecure. She was simply misunderstood. People believed her. She was charming, magnetic. I was quieter, easier to cast as the shadow. The worst moment came when I overheard her telling her sister, "Daniel's predictable. He'll never leave. I could walk all over him and he'd still be there." My chest tightened with every word. That night, lying beside her, I thought about everything I had sacrificed. Every time I swallowed pride, chose peace, and stayed silent. None of it was seen as patience. It was seen as weakness. That's when my decision became clear. Not in anger, but in the calm of early morning. She believed I'd never stand up for myself. That's when I started planning. Quietly, carefully. If she thought she knew me, it was time to prove her wrong. Her next girls' weekend came with a tone almost daring me to object. I nodded as if nothing was wrong, but inside, I already knew the truth. I had seen the cropped photos, the receipts left behind, the calls. She wasn't taking space. She was replacing me. The final confirmation came 2 days before her trip, when I found a hotel receipt in her jeans. 2 breakfasts, 2 cocktails, her handwriting on the signature. She hadn't even tried to hide it. That night, I asked her directly, "Claire, is there something you want to tell me about these trips?" ... She smiled coldly and replied, "Daniel, you're paranoid. Stop acting like we're married. I don't owe you explanations." The smirk told me she believed I'd never act. The true breaking point came the night before she left. She was in the shower and her phone lit up. I had never touched it before, but my hands shook as I picked it up. The first message was enough to stop my breath. "Can't wait to see you again this weekend." The name wasn't one of her girlfriends. It was a man's. I felt my throat tighten as I scrolled. The messages weren't vague or open to doubt. They were direct, intimate, the kind of words you only send when every boundary has already been crossed. Sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, I felt a heavy mix of anger, grief, and an odd calm. The calm of realizing every suspicion I'd carried had been real. I wasn't paranoid. I hadn't been insecure. I had been deceived for months. Worse, She mocked me for it. She stood in our living room, in front of her friends, laughing about how predictable I was, how I'd never walk away. She looked me in the eye and called me paranoid while secretly planning entire weekends with someone else. When she stepped out of the shower, towel around her, humming like nothing had happened, I couldn't look at her. I placed the phone exactly where it had been and walked out of the room. She didn't notice. She never noticed anymore, unless she needed an audience. That night, lying awake beside her, listening to her breathe, something inside me broke. Not in rage, not in tears, just in quiet, absolute finality. Whatever had been left between us was gone. She was no longer my partner. She was a stranger who had taken over my life, assuming I would never reclaim it. In that silence, a plan took shape. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront her with evidence she would dismiss. Instead, I would do something she would never expect, something that would dismantle the smug certainty she had built her narrative on. When she left for her weekend trip that Friday, tossing a careless "see you Sunday" over her shoulder, she didn't know it would be her last time walking out of our apartment. That was the turning point. Betrayal hardened into resolve, and her laughter laid the groundwork for the shock she would never see coming. When the door shut that Friday morning, the silence felt different. Not just quiet, heavy, final. For 3 years, my life had revolved around her moods, her approval, her dismissals. For the first time, I could see a world where she wasn't at the center. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it hurt. I sat on the couch we had picked together, gripping the cushions, letting the weight of it hit me. I had been lied to, manipulated, and humiliated. Every time I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. She took it as proof she could push further. Every night she laughed with friends about my supposed predictability. She convinced herself I'd never leave. And now I had the undeniable proof, the messages, the receipts, the cruelty in her words. The first wave wasn't anger, it was grief. I thought about the nights I stayed up late working so we could afford this apartment. The quiet sacrifices I made so she could have what she wanted. I remembered the dinners I planned, the surprises I organized, the times I defended her when my friends raised concerns. And for what? To be treated as a placeholder, a fool she could step over. That grief deepened as the hours passed. I didn't eat much. I barely moved. I walked through the apartment, staring at photos on the wall, recalling moments I once thought were genuine. A beach trip where she whispered she couldn't imagine life without me. A family gathering where she introduced me as the man she wanted forever. Now I knew they were empty promises. Touching those frames, the sting of betrayal cut all over again. By Saturday morning, the grief began to shift. I woke up in sheets still scented with her perfume, half tangled from the night before, and realized I couldn't drown in sorrow anymore. She had already taken my pride, my peace, my trust. If I let her take my will to stand for myself too, she'd win twice. And so, I started small. I pulled out a notebook and wrote everything I knew, the trips, the receipts, the messages, the conversations I overheard, not to confront her, but to remind myself this wasn't in my head. Every page was like reclaiming a part of me she had eroded. Then I looked around the apartment with new eyes. It wasn't ours anymore. It was hers. Her clothes spilling from the closet we were supposed to share. Her decorations filling the shelves. Her friends' voices lingering like ghosts. It felt less like my home and more like a stage where I had been cast as the background character. That realization sparked something I hadn't felt in years, the desire to take my space back. Saturday night, while she was out with whoever she'd been messaging, I sat at the kitchen table and thought of my father's words. Respect is the only thing that keeps love alive. The moment one person treats the other as if they don't matter, it's over. And it was over. She just didn't know it yet. But I wasn't going to end it as she expected. She thought I'd beg, yell, or cling to what she'd destroyed. That was the script she wrote for me, but I wasn't playing it. If she saw me as predictable, my unpredictability would be my sharpest tool. So I began preparing, quietly. I gathered the spare key she didn't know I had hidden. I set aside documents that mattered, my passport, financial papers, keepsakes she ignored. I boxed up small pieces of my life while she was gone. Then I thought about the note I would leave. Simple, honest, undeniable. Something she couldn't twist into a joke. By Sunday, I was exhausted, but in a different way. Not hollow from chasing scraps of affection, but steady with the weight of a decision I knew I'd follow through on. She would come home expecting me to be silent as usual. Instead, she'd find the beginning of the end. And as I waited in the quiet apartment, clock ticking toward her return, I realized I wasn't broken anymore. I was ready. That Sunday evening, when she walked in with her usual rehearsed story of shopping and spa days, I greeted her with calm indifference. She didn't notice the shift in my tone, or that my eyes no longer searched for the person I thought she was. While she unpacked her bags, I was already miles away in my mind. That was the first step in my rise: detachment. For months, my emotions had been her favorite tool. A smirk, a laugh, or a sharp remark could reduce me or push me to defend myself. Now, her attempts landed flat. I didn't argue, I didn't chase. And the more I withdrew, the more desperate she became to provoke reactions. Small digs turned sharper, but instead of breaking me, they reminded me how much control she only had because I gave it. In those evenings, while she assumed I was sulking, I was rebuilding. I picked up old projects, resumed freelance work, restarted my gym routine, and reached out to friends I had neglected. Slowly, I remembered who I was before Claire's shadow consumed me. Financially, I pulled threads she never noticed. The lease, the bills, the utilities, all in my name. Quietly, I redirected mail, opened a separate savings account, updated passwords. She didn't know it yet, but the foundation of her comfort was shifting beneath her. With each step, my confidence grew. I saw it in the mirror again, someone I respected. Even her friends noticed before she did. One evening, when they joked at my expense, I smiled, not with pain, but with quiet amusement. Claire waited for my usual reaction, but when none came, I saw the first crack in her certainty. At work, too, I thrived. Without the weight of managing her moods, my focus returned. My boss noticed, praising my progress and hinting at new opportunities. The biggest shift, though, came in small moments. Morning runs, cooking for myself, enjoying meals without seeking her approval. For the first time in years, I was living for me. The stronger I grew, the clearer it became. She had underestimated me. She thought I would cling, beg, crumble. Instead, I was rising in silence, becoming someone she could never diminish again. She sensed it. Her eyes lingered longer, her comments sharpened, but I was beyond them. I wasn't her audience anymore. I was writing my own script, and she wasn't part of it. What she didn't know was that while she grew restless at my quiet strength, I was laying the groundwork for change. This wasn't just about reclaiming pride. It was about preparing for the day when her key would no longer open the door she assumed was hers. By winter, my detachment had sharpened into focus. Every move I made had purpose. Claire still believed she was in control. But she was living in a house where the walls were shifting beneath her feet, and she hadn't realized it yet. One night, after too much wine, she laughed with her friends and said, "Daniel's harmless. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to. Everything's in my name." For a moment, her words froze me, until I remembered what she didn't know. Nothing was in her name. She had never checked the paperwork. The lease, the bills, the utilities, the accounts, they were all mine. She had mistaken my silence for dependence when really, she had been the dependent one. That realization shifted the balance in a way I hadn't even been seeking. She stood on ground she assumed was hers, but I had been the one supporting it all along. I didn't mention anything in the moment. Instead, I smiled calmly, refilled her friend's glasses, and went to bed early. Inside, though, I felt a new steadiness. I wasn't just regaining strength. I was taking control of the very life she believed belonged to her. The next step was financial. For months, I had been discreetly setting aside money into a separate account, trimming expenses, cutting out anything unnecessary. At first, it was simply to create a safety net, an exit plan if I needed one. But as the balance grew, I saw how strong a position it gave me. If she tried to push back, twist the story, or escalate things, I wouldn't be scrambling. I'd be prepared. She had no idea because she never bothered with bills or statements. She assumed my consistency meant she didn't need to pay attention. That carelessness would cost her more than she realized. Then came the practical side, the logistics of leaving. Slowly, I began moving my essentials. Important documents went into a locked drawer at work. Family keepsakes were stored at my brother's house. Even small items, clothes, electronics, tools, I rotated out until when the time came, little would remain for her to hold over me. To her, nothing seemed different. To me, everything was already underway. One of the most satisfying steps was changing the spare key. She didn't know it existed. Years ago, I had hidden it under a loose brick by the back stairwell in case I locked myself out. I swapped it for a copy of a new lock she had no idea I'd already arranged. At first, it was symbolic, but holding that key gave me a quiet rush. For the first time, she no longer held the key to this relationship, literally or figuratively. Yet the most important preparation wasn't physical, it was social. Remember how she painted herself as the victim, telling friends I was controlling and insecure? I countered that, not with arguments, but with consistency and presence. I carried myself more confidently, less tied to her moods. I reconnected with people she thought I had drifted from, and they noticed the change. Her old narrative unraveled because it no longer matched the man they saw. Once cracks appear in a story, people stopped trusting the storyteller. At home, though, I kept my mask on. I let her think I was the same quiet, predictable Daniel. She still went out on her girls' nights, still left her phone face down, still smirked when I didn't argue. She thought nothing had changed. But the rules were already rewritten. I wasn't only preparing to leave, I was preparing to leave her without ground to stand on. During this, the idea of the note solidified. It had to be short, clear, impossible to dismiss, something that would silence the smirk and echo long after she read it. I tested versions in my head, shaping the words. I wanted her to feel the finality, the sense of being outside with no key, no control, no certainty. By the time her next weekend trip came up, I wasn't anxious. I was calm, steady, with every detail in place. She thought she was heading into another carefree escape. She didn't know the door she relied on would no longer open. Friday morning arrived with her usual routine. Claire moved around the apartment, tossing clothes into her bag, humming without a care. She kissed my cheek absently, more out of habit than affection, and called back, "Don't wait up for me, okay?" I replied evenly, keeping my voice neutral, hiding everything I knew. When the door closed, I acted. The locksmith I had scheduled earlier in the week arrived. By noon, the locks were changed quietly. He handed me the new keys, and I felt their weight like the shift of an entire life. The apartment, once filled with her chaos, felt different, lighter, free. For the first time, it was mine again. Then came the note. I had drafted countless versions, filled with anger and accusations, but I knew that wasn't the point. Claire thrived on drama, on conflict she could twist and retell. What she couldn't spin was silence turned into truth. So I wrote, "Claire, this home isn't yours anymore. The lease, the bills, the life you took for granted, they were all mine. You lied, you mocked, and you thought I would never leave. You were wrong. Don't try the key. It won't work. Don't call me. There's nothing left to say. Daniel." Short, final, beyond debate. I taped it at eye level on the door, where she'd see it instantly. The rest of that day felt calm. I boxed up her things, clothes, makeup, trinkets, and stacked them neatly by the door. Nothing destroyed, nothing thrown out. This wasn't about chaos. It was about clarity. By Sunday evening, I was ready. I stayed at a friend's place nearby, waiting for her return. When I finally walked back, I stopped far enough to watch unseen. The apartment was dark, the note waiting, boxes lined up like quiet witnesses. Then she arrived, chatting on the phone, bag over her shoulder, carefree. She slipped her key into the lock. It didn't turn. Again. Each attempt sharper, her laughter fading to silence. Frustration spread across her face as she rattled the handle, then reached for her phone. Before she could dial, her eyes caught the note. She froze, staring. I couldn't read her lips from a distance, but I saw the shock in her expression. Her hand dropped, the phone nearly slipping as she tore the note down and read it again. Her smirk was gone. For the first time, she wasn't in control. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, surrounded by boxes, her own belongings as proof of what was left. The night was quiet, except for my steady footsteps. Behind me, she held only the shattered illusion of power. But that wasn't the end. Because endings aren't in the act, they're in the fallout. The next morning, when I turned my phone on, dozens of messages waited. First, frantic. "Daniel, the lock is broken. Let me in. Where are you?" Then sharp and angry. "You'll regret this. You can't embarrass me like this." Then softer. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, we can fix this." The tone grew more desperate as she realized her hold was gone. I didn't answer. By that afternoon, she showed up at my office. She caused a scene in the lobby, demanding to see me. Security escorted her out. Word spread. The image she had built of me as weak and controlling collapsed. My coworkers saw her for who she was, loud, entitled, unraveling. The narrative had shifted. Later that week, she called from a blocked number. Her voice cracked. "Daniel, don't throw this away. I made mistakes, but we're meant to be together." I let the silence linger, then said the only words left. "Respect was all I asked for." You laughed instead. Then I hung up. That was the last time I heard her voice. The fallout continued on its own. Friends distanced themselves from her. The man she had been sneaking off with disappeared once the drama surfaced. She moved in with her sister, but that didn't last. Without the illusion of control, her bridges burned quickly. Meanwhile, my life grew steadier. I signed a new lease, smaller but fully mine, filled only with what mattered to me. I started running, took on freelance projects, even rejoined an old band of friends for weekend sessions. Each step forward reminded me I had mistaken her weight for companionship. Without it, I could breathe again. The final piece closed about a month later. I stopped by the old building to settle utilities. Outside, I saw her, shoulders slumped, holding a single bag. She noticed me too. For a moment, her eyes lit up with hope, but I walked past without stopping. I heard her whisper, "Please," but I didn't look back. Because the greatest revenge wasn't the lock, the note, or even the silence. It was walking away with my head high, leaving her standing in the ruins of the power she thought she'd always hold. And that's how it ended. She with nothing, me with everything I had finally reclaimed.